Your home is typically the safest place you can be. That is, until someone attempts to break in. Here are 3 chilling home invasion stories. Several years ago, I was involved in a car accident that caused some minor spinal injuries, mostly swelling that resulted in partial paralysis. Not able to return home due to us living in an apartment on the 2nd floor with no elevator, I became a resident at a physical therapy rehabilitation center. After finally regaining the ability to walk, aided by a walker and moving around in a wheelchair, it was decided that I would get my own place using Section 8 housing. After much searching, I found a nice spot, a ground floor condominium in a relatively safe part of town. The one-room condo had a wide living room with attached kitchenette and a wide hallway leading to the bedroom in the back of the place. With my family's help, I was all moved in and ready to begin living independently for the first time. After a great first meal in my own place, pizza from a local restaurant, I decided to go to bed. As days turned to weeks, I began to learn the ins and outs of life in this condo complex, and for the most part, everything was fine, except for the skeevy guy who would often be seen prowling around, who I later learned was the brother of one of my neighbors. Said sleazeball was a perpetually recovering meth addict who would live with his brother whenever his girlfriend would throw him out of their apartment. Upon learning this news, my father came to see me one evening, out of the blue. After a nice dinner, he asked me if I still had my concealed carry permit, and me, being a proud supporter of the Second Amendment, answered in the affirmative. However, my gun was still in storage and not yet in my possession. He smiled, reached into his bag, and presented me with a housewarming present, an X-Tac Elite carry comp, one of his favorite pieces from his collection. After bidding my father a fond farewell, I decided to retire to my bedroom, and after watching YouTube videos on my Fire TV, I decided to fall asleep. A few weeks go by, and I largely forget about my new toy, having stashed it in the drawer next to my bed until the day in question. I had to do some grocery shopping, and after calling for my transportation, a company called Veo that offers free rides for the disabled, I went to the store and bought my groceries for the week, and after thanking the driver for helping me bring them inside, I packed them away and once again retired to bed. Several hours later, I woke up to a noise that sounded like scratching at my bedroom door. Opening it, I see nothing, but hear it further down the hallway, and it hits me that someone is trying to pry the door open. Slowly closing the bedroom door, I fish in the drawer for my gun, and taking it out of the holster and placing it at my side with the safety off, I slowly roll down the hallway to the kitchen, just in time to hear the door give away. A flashlight beam scans the interior, just in front of the door, as the shadowy silhouette of the intruder enters. Needless to say, he is surprised when I flip on the lights and he finds himself bathed in the fluorescent glow of the overhead lights. He looks at me shocked at first, and then remembering that he's got a knife and I'm a seemingly helpless guy in a wheelchair, his eyes suddenly grow to the size of saucers as I produce my gun from the chair beside me and fire, hitting him center mass. He drops his knife and heads screaming outside the door and collapses on the ground feet away. I hear his labored breathing, most likely from a collapsed lung, and grab for the phone to call the police. As I'm on the phone with them, other residents, probably woken up by either the shot or subsequent screams, emerge from their condos to see the potential robber splayed out on the lawn. The police soon arrive and render emergency first aid to the guy before paramedics arrive and take over. I give my statement to the police, and they of course have to take my gun in as evidence, which I begrudgingly hand over. I later get it back after the shoot is ruled self-defense. Yippee! Come to find out sometime later that my late night visitor was the sketchy brother of my neighbor. The police said that he confessed to planning on robbing me because cripples are easy targets, his exact words. The cop who told me this looked at me and smiled slyly, saying that he chose the wrong cripple, I guess, with a reassuring pat on the shoulder. As for the brother who was my neighbor, he and his girlfriend were encouraged to move out, and I was thankful to see them go because a new tenant moved in soon afterwards, a much better person, if I do say so myself. The drug addict brother survived, and last I heard, he was in prison with a 5-year sentence for armed robbery in the first degree. A couple years ago, I was in my senior year of high school. I had just turned 18 and was living with my older brother and my dad, who was a single parent. We had recently moved into a beach condo right on the shores in San Diego. It was a strange setup where one unit was on the 3rd floor and then the 2nd and 1st floor were divided in half vertically into 2 units. We lived on the side open to the sidewalk. The other side had a gated boardwalk entry and was right next to another condo of similar style. The condo was a bit older and creepy when we moved in. There were 2 master suites and 1 regular bedroom, all on the 2nd floor. Since my brother only came home to sleep, my dad and I each had one of the suites. I was also sort of a daddy's princess. We were all pretty happy and loved the new place. Until I found a door. Again, this condo was a little strange. In my room, there was a sunroom. It had been a balcony at one point. You could tell by the concrete floor and the drain in the middle of it, but had been closed in by large windows. I liked to sit there to do homework with my cat. She enjoyed the sun, and I enjoyed the view of the ocean. But as much as I had been out there, I never considered moving the bookshelf that had been there since before we moved in. Because, well, why the fuck would I? That was until my cat was going ballistic and I noticed her chase a mouse behind it. I told my dad and we bought a couple of mouse traps. We were going to put them behind the bookshelf and went to move it out of the way. When we shifted it, we saw the door. It was locked, and we were never given a key for it. Although we figured it was just a storage closet, my dad and I were both curious, so we asked the landlord. They had no idea what it led to. So we did the logical thing and hired a locksmith who opened up the door to reveal a hidden fire escape. It was a dark and creepy indoor stairway that led to a door in our shared garage. The only way to get to this door was from the 3rd-story balcony or the door inside our garage. Either way, you had to already be in the building to get to it, so we weren't really worried about it. A few days later, my dad and brother decided to go on a small road trip. They left me behind because I was still in school and drove myself to class anyways. I had stayed home alone many times before. I was used to it and never really got lonely thanks to my cat and small dog. Nobody besides my boyfriend knew that I would be home alone, and nobody besides my dad and myself knew about that door, so I felt rather safe. I went to bed late. I was a night owl and cuddled up with my cat and dog and fell asleep while watching a movie on my laptop. I awoke at God knows what time. It was after 1 a.m., but still dark out, to my small dog freaking out and a person trying to get into my room through that door. My dog attacked them and quite possibly saved my life. And I went back to bed thinking it was all a dream. The next morning, I went to grab my backpack from the sunroom, and there was blood everywhere. The door was still open, and there was blood leading down the stairs. I called my boyfriend and my dad, then finally the cops and my school to let them know I wouldn't be coming in today. The cops took samples of the blood and pictures of the trail. Then they got a good laugh when I showed them the Terrier Chihuahua mix who protected me and from the looks of it took a good bite out of the stranger's leg. My dad and brother cut their trip short and my boyfriend stayed with me until they got back. I was terrified. I couldn't think of anyone who knew about that door, had access to it, and possibly was timing it for my dad and brother to be gone. The cops never came back with anything, and we put the bookshelf back. But it took a long time for me to be able to sleep easily in that room again. Who knows what would have happened to me if my dog wasn't there. Okay, so for context, I often have trouble sleeping due to poor self-control with devices and social media usage. Today was one of those nights which kept dragging on, and I ended up getting up from my computer to grab something to drink from the kitchen. In the corridor, I noticed a cockroach and spent some time chasing it, trying to pick it up with a piece of paper and throw it outside from our balcony. I ended up losing track of it when it scampered off behind the sofa, so I eventually gave up and decided to leave it. That's when I heard the doorknob of our apartment door twisting down. I live with 2 other roommates, so I'm quite used to the sound of the door being unlocked, but this wasn't that. It was just the metal creaking of the doorknob being pressed. At first, I thought maybe the sound came from my room. I hadn't closed the door, and with most of our balconies and windows being left open at night, it's very warm during the day here, so we take the night as an opportunity to cool the apartment down. We usually have a draft, which makes doors close and open on their own. I thought the metallic sound could have been the hinges of the door from my room, but as I went back to the corridor, I knew it wasn't the hinges in my room. The sound was clearly coming from the main apartment door, and I could see the doorknob slowly pressing down, then releasing. This repeated a few times. Soft, slow press down, release. Moment of silence. Soft, slow press down, release, and so on. I was now absolutely certain that there was someone outside the door, but had no idea who it could be. I briefly considered if it was one of my roommates, but for one, they all have their own keys and will be able to unlock the door. And secondly, I remember seeing all of them return much earlier in the evening. Plus, if one of them did somehow end up outside without their key, why wouldn't they say anything? Something like, "Op, I forgot my keys. Please open the door." So my second assumption was that it was a robber, trying people's doors in the middle of the night to see if anyone had accidentally left theirs open, to sneak in and steal stuff. But that soon turned out to be very unlikely. I grabbed the doorknob and held it up to stop the person on the other side from pressing it, then said, "What the fuck? What the hell are you doing?" I wanted it to sound aggressive, but it came out very uneven and pathetic. No response. That was already too much. They definitely heard me. Our walls aren't soundproofed or anything. You can hear pretty clearly in and out of the apartment. They must have been completely aware that I was on the other side, just like I knew they were on theirs, but nothing. Not a word. No sound of panic or running. After a moment of silence, they tried the doorknob again. I banged on the door, thinking that maybe they didn't speak English, so I should use a nonverbal gesture. That's when the most terrifying part happened. I don't know if it was real or just my imagination, but I swear to God, I could hear a soft tapping on the door. It was quiet and a bit fast, like someone drumming their fingers. Very different from my banging, which was just 2 hard, solid sounds. I immediately thought their tapping must be some sort of response to my knocking. Looking back at it now, it's possible I might have just imagined it. I was panicking at that point, but I think I heard something like that. For a moment, I considered settling the matter myself. I went to my room to grab my keys, grabbed a big kitchen knife, and was preparing to unlock the door, but just couldn't. I was frozen with fear, and I had the strong sense that this was exactly what they were waiting for. I thought this might have been their plan, taunting me with the doorknob and the tapping. waiting for the moment I get angry enough to unlock the door and go outside. So I didn't open the door. I stood there, holding the knife, and I said, "I don't know who you are or what you want, but fuck off. Stop trying to open our door and fuck off. If you keep trying, I'll call the police. If you keep pressing down on the doorknob, I'll call the police." Again, it sounded much weaker and shakier than I wanted it to. And again, absolutely no response from the other side. There was a moment of silence before the doorknob started being pressed again. I called 911 and gave them my address, explaining the situation to the dispatcher. As I was talking, the door didn't move or make any noises. After I hung up the phone, I saw the doorknob be pressed down one more time, and then it stopped for good. The last thing of note is that I eventually heard the main door of the apartment block clicking shut. I realized that the weirdo must have gone downstairs and exited the building, so I rushed out onto the balcony to see if I could catch a glimpse of them. I didn't see anything. They must have either left very quickly or kept close to the wall on the sidewalk, which wasn't visible as it was blocked by the balconies from the floor below. The police arrived shortly after, and I had to awkwardly re-explain the situation to them. They asked me if it could have been a drunk or someone trying to get into their own apartment, but that was obviously nonsense. A drunk would have moved around more and made noise, while a person trying to get into their own apartment would have tried the key and wouldn't have pressed the doorknob so slowly and deliberately. The police checked every floor and found nobody, so the weirdo had probably left like I thought. I felt bad for the officers who looked somewhat indifferent to the whole thing. I apologized a few times for making them come out at such a late hour and for such a trivial thing. The whole situation was so surreal that explaining it felt stupid and ridiculous. At one point, I even wondered if maybe it was all in my head. There was nobody on the other side of the door, and I was just hallucinating because of lack of sleep. But no, I'm sure I saw the doorknob move, and I felt pressure when I held it. I also think I heard rustling, either feet shuffling or clothes rustling, which was another reason I'm confident there was someone on the other side. I even think I might have heard them trying the doorknob of our neighbor's apartment from across. So, in the end, what the hell even happened? If they were a burglar, they would have left the moment they realized someone was awake and monitoring the apartment. Why would they keep trying the doorknob? One press on it, and they immediately knew that it was locked. I thought maybe they were trying to pick the lock or something. Maybe there's some kind of lock-picking technique which requires you to keep softly pressing the doorknob? But again, that wouldn't make sense if they knew I was right there on the other side. Really, here's my theory, even if it probably doesn't make that much sense. I think they were genuinely a burglar who somehow snuck into the apartment complex. From there, they tried every door, softly pressing on the doorknob to see if any owner had forgotten to lock theirs. When they came to my door, however, they heard my shuffling and walking and came up with a different plan. They would keep slowly pressing the doorknob until this pissed me off enough that I'd unlock the door and go outside, at which point they'd take me out, maybe kill me? They never said anything, since trying to threaten or intimidate me would just lead to me calling the cops faster, and pretending to be another tenant would also be way too suspicious. So they just kept perfectly quiet, hoping that the silence and ambiguity would make me anxious enough to unlock the door, just to find out who's there. When they heard me talk to the dispatcher, they realized the police would arrive soon, and decided to scram before they got cornered in the apartment building. That's the only explanation I can think of, but it obviously has huge flaws. For one, what would their plan be once they took me out? Would they really be able to kill me quickly and silently at 4:30 a.m. without waking up any of the other tenants, then proceed to ransack my apartment? That's so much work and risk, and for what? A burglary? Plus, I have roommates, something which they might not have known, but it certainly is a possibility they'd need to consider, I might have not been the only one they need to deal with. So, I'm at a loss. Has anything similar happened to anyone here? Is it some kind of prank? A meme? Like I said earlier, could it be a lock-picking method? Or is this truly some unhinged weirdo who likes to spook people for fun? Well, they succeeded. I was shaking through the whole ordeal. What the hell? Just imagining them standing in front of my door in complete silence, ignoring everything I do or say, and just trying the doorknob over and over. It felt like being the protagonist in a creepypasta or something.